Hello, I'm Coach Pav, and today I'm going to be discussing the importance about being mindful about your recovery. So most people, a lot of people get stuck in this repetitive behavioral pattern with regards to their training and recovery, where you go out and you do the training, you do the, you do the session, you do really well, you eat well, you sleep well, you do everything, and you revolve like this. And I think people kind of tend to just assume that as long as they do all of the right things, the recovery comes. And it's not quite as simple as that, unfortunately. The point of today's video is going to be how you can make sure that you remain mindful of your recovery, the warning signs, some great tips, what you need to do, and best practice for ensuring that you don't get into that rhythm where you eventually end up needing to take time off the bike or really ratchet down your training, or drop the intensity for a bit just to allow that extra recovery. So like I said, it's super important to do this because without having this kind of mindfulness around it, you just tend to not necessarily notice it. Now, this is a thing with like chronic fatigue, because it comes on slowly and it builds over a longer period of time. It's very hard to notice. It's not like acute fatigue where you might go out and you might smash like, a 100-mile ride or 200-mile ride or whatever it is, and the next day you feel tired, or even after in the evening you feel tired. That's acute fatigue, and that's obvious, right? Because you feel knackered, you feel absolutely spent, everything like that. It becomes really challenging. Chronic fatigue is totally different, and it builds over a period of time, and it can be really hard to notice. So there are some fantastic gadgets that are on the market that can help with this, but I think we do need to go back to our roots, back to the basics with this. The obvious three I think that you can get, which Whoop, Oura Ring, and Apple Watch does some similar stuff too. They've all got limitations. I gave up on my Whoop. They might have changed the algorithm by now. I'm sure in years to come it's probably going to be a lot better, but some of the numbers were just ridiculous sometimes, and didn't often correlate. Haven't got any experience of Oura Ring or really using my Apple Watch to guide this. I think that it can be interesting numbers as long as you have the mindfulness around it too. I definitely don't think you should live by those straps, by those measurements. I'm sure one day they'll be a lot better, a lot more accurate, a lot more sort of explanation behind how they get those numbers. But for right now, I think that actually being able to make a decision on your own, maybe guided by some information, is going to be far more valuable. So I think it's really important for me to give you some top tips on how to aid your recovery before I get stuck in. And they're nothing new. I've done loads of blogs and videos. You can search for those on my website, or you can, I'll put the links in the description if you're on YouTube. But they're basic stuff. Eat right, eat a diet high in fruits and vegetables, lean proteins. And that's as simple as it is, ensuring that you're hydrating as well. Sleep 7 to 8 hours a night is ideal. Reducing stress. Stress is a massive one. I will link some resources around stress. I'm big on having that. A lot of my clients are work high pressure jobs, lots of hours, and working with them to reduce stress is actually one of the fastest ways to see improvements in performance, surprisingly for some. And then we've got mindset. I'm going to talk about mindset in a minute. It's really important. I'm going to break down some rules that you've had probably since a child, which I think are not applicable if you are an athlete and training. And then of course, one of the most important parts is how you come out of each session. So that's immediately as the cool down, but do you do any stretching, foam rolling? Do you have percussion gun like Tim Tam or hyper gun or whatever it's called? And even some sort of air compression pump, trousers, pants, whatever you will, and stuff like massage and stuff like that. So all of these things are the main things that if you can say you're actively looking at these every day or every session or whenever is necessary, you're probably doing the work. Moving on to mindset, which I think is huge. I think that we all been brought up with these set of rules around how we should operate, and especially with the challenges around diet and obesity and stuff like this, as we look to remedy that as a society. I think it's a societal problem, and there's a lot of pressure, and we get taught a lot of things. And I think that the biggest one for me is that we're often, if you're, lift or elevator, do you take that or do you take the stairs? And we're often told, if you want to be fit and healthy, you take the stairs. Now, here's the stupid thing with this, is that if you are spending, lots of time and energy on your bike training, and then you're doing this, do you need to take the stairs? Is that actually helping your training? Does it make you a healthier person? Oh no, potentially. In fact, actually, it can contribute to your performance being worse, you overtraining, you're not recovering well enough. So I think that the biggest thing, if you take one thing away from this video, this blog, the podcast, which I will do as well, is that if you really want to maximize every potential, they call it recovery point or whatever you want to say, is have that mindset, develop that mindset. Ask yourself every time you're faced with a decision, will this aid or hinder my recovery? Will this make me stronger in my next session, or actually will it potentially hinder it? And I think that when you start going about your day like that, you're going to have so many more little epiphanies around what you normally would see as a good thing we've been taught, actually doesn't really apply to you, because you don't need to be healthier. You're already really healthy. You don't need to walk anymore. Standing desks can be great. I mean, there's a reason where you might have that, but ultimately, if you stood up 8 hours a day, are you going to be better on your bike session? I'm not suggesting that you'd be better if you sat for 8 hours a day, but there's probably a good mix in there, and it probably doesn't look like you needing to be stood for a long old time. So hopefully now you can take that away, and you can have a little think about some of the rules that you have been taught, or have even self-taught, which actually could be hindering your training. And now let's have a little think about the warning signs. Now there's some really quite powerful warning signs around our recovery. Now I'm someone, I have if you've known me, followed me for a long time, you'll know that I'm bipolar. I have a very big history of my mental health, and it's something that honestly, when I start to get tired, or I start to overtrain, or even under recover, or start to build towards big events, bigger challenges, it's the easiest warning sign for me, is how I'm able to maintain that. I've become very successful in managing my mental health and creating relative stability, if you know much about bipolar. But when I get tired, when I don't sleep consistently for a long time, or if I've done a lot of big heavy week of training, some of the warning signs are very, very prominent for me, and they're the same for everybody. They're just probably not as loud as they are for someone which has a history of mental health. But they're talking about being grumpy. Most people will realize or notice that actually they're short-tempered, or more short-tempered. They're very grumpy, quick to react in a way that they wouldn't normally when they're sort of tired and overtrained. Struggle with sleep, that's a big one. Even being really hungry. Like, sometimes people will report back to me and they'll be like, hey, look, I ate a massive meal and I'm still hungry later on. If you have that can be a symptom of you constantly emptying your glycogen stores and really struggling to refill them up. So your body kind of is like, oh, I need to really eat, or to replenish that. Another couple are more physical, so you might notice obviously that your performance in training is less. Maybe you can't hit the power as well as you could, or maybe it's a real struggle to hold that. That's an obvious warning sign that I'm sure most of us are familiar with. But another little one can be just challenges with doing normal day-to-day activities, such as walking up the stairs. If you get a bit short of breath, that can be a symptom that you're actually overdoing it a little bit. So there's the big ones. I'm sure you've got some that you can relate to as well. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how you actually bring them together and how you measure this. As I said earlier, Whoop, Oura Ring, Apple Watch, all of those monitoring software can be useful, but they're to be taken with a pinch of salt, as is most data when it comes to the human body. So there are some crucial KPI, key performance indicators, that I look to when I am talking with my clients around, are they actually feeling recovered? And some of them are used in some calculations by software, wearables, and some are, considered old school. You've got like resting heart rate variability, sleep. You can use apps to get that, or it's not just quantity but quality. I've written a great blog and done some content on sleep, which I will link as well for you to look at. But the biggest one for me is probably just how you feel when you wake up. It's such a big indicator of how recovered you are. If you wake up and you feel really energetic, like you can get out of bed and you're feeling amazing, you're pretty well recovered. If you feel really tired, really like beaten up, you're probably not. And I'm sure that actually next time you go and do a big ride or a big hard session, the morning after, just think about that when you wake up. That's a good obvious example of how well you're recovered, because you wouldn't necessarily expect to be very recovered after that. It's not to say that you would change your training at all, but it's a good way of developing that mindfulness around that bigger picture. And like I said, you've got some warning signs, you've got some actual kind of objective or quantitative measures, and then you look at those at the big picture. That's so important to remember. There is a big picture with all of this, and not to get hung up on any isolated numbers. A big one's always kind of that heart rate variability or that resting heart rate, and even sort of like Whoop recovery scores, Aura Ring and stuff like that. You get a few consecutive numbers that are, looking bad. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not recovering. There could be loads of other influences around that, and the big question is, how do you feel? I know it's very subjective. It's really hard to quantify that because it's a feeling, but ultimately, that having that mindfulness is going to do you so much better than any sort of number or system, as is the market at the moment. So, as I said, big picture around all of this. Make sure you are looking at a number of measures. Take everything with a pinch of salt and track it over a long period of time. Track it when you've been off the bike through rest. If you're sick, track it as well, because that can give you an idea around times where you might get sick, especially if you're overtraining and you're susceptible to that. Track it when you go on a camp or anything like that, because that's an obvious time where you're going to become fatigued, and you're going to start to see all of the warning signs around that. Like, do you feel grumpy? Are you quicker to react in a negative way? Does your sleep drop off a cliff? Do you get super hungry? Is your resting heart rate up? Is your heart rate variability going the wrong way? All of these things, they build a big picture. And that's the way you can tell if you're recovered. Now, of course, and it's going to sound biased, the other way is to work with a coach. Now, the reason why I work with a coach when I'm doing crazy challenges and I'm training is because it removes that bias. And I think that the problem is with subjective, even some of these quantitative measurements, is that actually we sometimes look for confirmation bias, and that is, looking for the fact that you want to be recovered, right? Because none of us want to feel like we're weak. None of us want to have to take the foot off the gas. We want to go hard all the time. And sometimes we actually might ignore some of the bigger warning signs in favor of the little ones, which actually tell us or confirm for us that we can go hard, or we can go longer, or we can continue to push, which actually might not be the best. So I'm always happy to chat coaching. 15-minute consultations are absolutely free. Hit my website, fill out the form, and we can have a little chat about that. For more information on anything I've talked about, if you're on my website, this will be embedded into the blog, so you can just scroll down and have a look. And if you're on YouTube, if you scroll down to the description, I will link in any of the other resources as well. But feel free to reach out, feel free to send me a question. Happy to always leave a comment, share with your friends, give me a thumbs up. Everything you can do is really appreciated. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking about recovery with you today. My name is Coach Pav. Have an awesome day.